Welcome to the Libra podcast, where education leaders explore the intersection of culture, strategy, and innovation in today's schools. I'm your host, Nate Lichte, and in each episode, we'll uncover the leadership habits, systems, and bold ideas that help districts thrive.
Well, Kellen, thank you so much for jumping on and sharing some time with me today. If you wouldn't mind, would you mind introducing yourself, giving us a little bit about who you are and the district that you're serving in?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So 17-year educator, all within Kansas, actually Kansas born and raised.
Wow.
I have slowly moved my way from Western Kansas all the way to really the eastern border. My office is about 3 blocks actually from the Missouri River. Currently located in Leavenworth County and within the city of Leavenworth, and the district is actually named that as well. We have about 3,200 kids here and what is known as a 5A high school classification system. We are one of the state's smallest school districts geographically. We're only 17 square miles, so we actually don't even cover the entire city of Leavenworth.
Wow.
And I would tell people that we are one of, if not the most unique ecosystem in the state of Kansas. We have both extreme wealth, generational wealth. If you can imagine being the first city in the state of Kansas, there are families that have moved here, stayed here, and certainly raised several generations, but also significant levels of poverty. 3 correctional institutions, one of which is at the federal level, one of which is the combined disciplinary barracks for all of the United States military, and then one is at the state level. And then here, probably any day, will be an ICE detention camp. And so just all of the things that come with an institution, or the institutions, I should say, that are in the business of corrections. Just north of my office then is also the intellectual capital of the Army. That we are home to Fort Leavenworth. And this post is unique in that it is not necessarily where troops are trained, but rather where officers receive their leadership training. So a bit different than, say, some of our other more traditional installations across the United States.
Wow. That community has to bring a lot of unique challenges and opportunities to leading a school district.
Absolutely. Without hesitation. Again, I tell people this all the time. I mean it when I say it. I think we're the most unique school system in Kansas.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing some more about that. So maybe back up a little bit. Tell us what brought you into, district leadership and education in the beginning. We've interviewed a few folks, and there's a specific teacher that sort of helped them out. But what's your story? How'd you get into education?
Sure, maybe took the I'm going to say untraditional path.
Yeah,
I was never going to be an education major. In fact, in high school and as I'm getting ready to walk across the stage of graduation, was really interested in business and finance. And so chose to pursue that degree and was very much interested in working in a for-profit sector and in the marketing, management, accounting type of field. Long story short is at the sophomore year received a call to come back to my own middle school and be what's called a Rule 10 coach. Rule 10 in Kansas is essentially a rule that allows folks that aren't yet full-time teachers to still be able to serve as assistant coaches. 2 weeks into practice, I'm in my advisor's office figuring out how I can change my major so that I could become an educator, because I said, hey, I want to coach the rest of my life. And the AD said, I think that's great, but trust me, you're going to need to teach first so that you can pay the bills, because coaching really doesn't put food on the table. Was fortunate that I did not have to waste any credits. They allowed me to transfer everything as I changed my major to business education. Ended up teaching for 5 years at the same middle school where I had once been. So, I have left there, and 10 years later, I'm back literally now with colleagues that once were sending me to the office, right? It was about year 3 that I decided that, hey, I still like education, but I really wanted something more than the classroom. And so had pursued my master's at the building level. And after 5 years of teaching, became a principal. Became a principal in a really small rural district in Northwest Kansas where there are legitimately more deer than people. There's a total of 5 counties that the district had at least parts in.
Yeah.
For 200 total students, and I was K-12 principal. And so literally could deal with a kindergartner 1 hour and deal with a senior trying to figure out how to maybe get some embedded or dual credits the next. And really just allowed me to kind of see a broader perspective. Often people serve at the building level as a building leader. They may only be at, say, an elementary building. And so they're really kind of hyper-focused or laser-focused, I should say, maybe the elementary only. That then kind of, I would say, sparked an interest to go into district leadership. And so pursued my doctorate and was able to then move into an assistant superintendent role in the Wichita metro area. So this is now my, 12th year in administration and 10th year at the district office.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. It's interesting that the folks that either, that I've chatted with that have taken they've started coaching or something like that, and that coaching turns into a greater opportunity just because the interaction you get with the kids at that point is just by far, some of the best experiences. And then how that leads to growing and scaling that impact so that you can, continue to do the great work. What brought you to Leavenworth? You're from Kansas, so you've known about Leavenworth, obviously, but how did that opportunity all come about?
Sure. I would say a couple of factors led to it. First of which is our desire to stay within the state of Kansas. Family is driving that, as well as a retirement system that says, hey, if you leave, you're not going to be able to retire as soon as you'd like, right? So we've really committed to stay here in Kansas for a couple of good reasons. About the third year in Chanute, which is where my first superintendency was. Chanute was a system in Southeast Kansas. I started kind of getting the itch for something bigger and said, hey, I want to be strategic to my wife. I want to be strategic about where we go next. And so what I need you to do, dear, is something really important. And that's, I put a map in front of her. I said, cross out all the places you're unwilling to live, right? Well, she quickly eliminated the majority of the state. So suffice it to say, what was left pretty much determined where we were going to go, right?
Yeah.
And she was largely interested in either the Wichita metro area or the Kansas City metro area. From there, then I said, okay, that's fine. I will then identify the districts that I'm interested in, and kind of that cross-pollination, so to speak, will represent the districts we go after. That was actually a really short list, believe it or not. If I recall, it was like 25, 26 districts. Yeah. And I said, okay, so here's the deal. You've agreed, we've agreed together. If and when one of these comes open, I'm clicking apply. And Leavenworth came open in December, and the rest is history.
Yeah. That's also a really cool approach that you shared. So much about when you find the right district, so much of that is about the community, right? Like, and you've got a unique perspective because you're from Kansas, you're still serving in Kansas. That doesn't always happen with superintendents. They're jumping around, but key for, I think, aspiring superintendents is to really narrow in and think about the community, not just for you as a leader and leading that district, but your family and how that plays out in the communities that you want to be a part of. That helps to drive, strong leaders in those districts. So to kind of jump forward with Leavenworth now and thinking about some of the leadership challenges and things that you've kind of gone through, tell us about some of the challenges that you've kind of run into as you've been in Leavenworth for quite some time.
Sure. Several different ones. The one I'd probably highlight the most that kind of still has, I would say, an ongoing, we really haven't yet seen the end of it effect is our declining enrollment. Yeah. So for context, again, this is a total city of about 25,000. When you combine the Fort and then the sister city of Lansing, we honestly push almost 40,000 people, right? Yeah. The district itself has about 2/3 of the city of Leavenworth, and at the turn of the century was over 4,000 students. Wow. And in our glory day, our peak, we were almost at 4,400. Here today, we find ourselves at 3,200. Wow. And so as you could imagine, right-sizing a system like that really has been, I would say, declining almost every year. But here recently, that decline has kind of picked up. It's kind of accelerated. And at the same time, of course, you're trying to remain competitive with staff salaries and wages. You've got the impacts of inflation, et cetera. It has created a really, I would say, difficult kind of, I'm going to say, storm of a perfect storm of events that has made the overall budget picture really difficult to navigate. So that'd be challenge one. Challenge two is a systemic issue that didn't show up overnight and certainly won't go away overnight. And that is a system that is highly transient in nature. So again, for context, about 3,300 kids annually, like clockwork, our system transitions about 600. And so here is, effectively, I'm going to say 20%, in round numbers, 20% of our student population that will be new from one year to the next. And that is obviously tied to, some of it's tied to our military connectedness, some of it's tied to our prison connectedness, but then a lot of it, I believe, is just tied to the demographics of our community, right? In addition to the student transition that's high, we also then have a high level of transient staff population. So again, having been in, this is now my 5th school district, this is without hesitation the highest level of staff transition. Again, for context, about 300 teachers in round numbers. Annually, we're turning about 20%. And I would say that's almost double of the next district that I've been in. And so just imagine the number of new faces and new expectations or expectations that need to be reaffirmed, right? And then the bigger, I guess, piece is the culture. They can't really stick because the boundary lines of the culture are constantly being rewritten. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that'd be some challenges.
Yeah. That there's multiple ways that I'm thinking about how that impacts the districts. I mean, well, first, like just with going back to what you mentioned with just declining enrollment coupled with sort of this transient population of both students and staff, like how do you communicate? I mean, that leads to budget challenges, right? When you've got declining enrollments and those things. So how are you communicating those budget realities to staff in the communities while still maintaining morale, positive culture, and trust? Like that's the first thing that immediately comes to mind when you're navigating all of that.
Yep. So I go back to the 3-legged stool, right? The 3-legged stool is data, story, and a relationship. And in my opinion, the piece that we do really well of is the data. Where I've hopefully helped is providing the story. But at the end of the day, we've got to have the relationship first, right?
Yeah.
And so to your point of, building trust, transparency, et cetera, that is done through kind of a consistent cadence with that. Yeah. If I only share our budget quandary once a year annually at the meeting, that isn't really being consistent, right? And so I've tried to put this thing on repeat, so to speak. And so every civic organization, every chamber meeting, every opportunity that I get, it's probably, honestly, people are saying he said that so much, it's nauseating, right? But it has got to be something that is said ad nauseum, in my opinion, just because of the weight that it has, right? What I want people to connect with, the story piece, is, hey, this is going to have an impact. It's going to require more kids to be in every classroom. It's going to require tough decisions that may result in a program that your child, your grandchild is in that no longer will exist. It's going to fill in the blank. Last year we closed a building. And so, you start to connect the story, right? And then finally, I would say the data becomes important because I think for most people, managing $40+ million in expenses is something they've never done, right? Yeah. Most of us, the biggest expense in our life is probably our house, right? Yeah. We will we will monthly approve expenses that exceed most people's cost of their home, right? Just in 1 month. And so being able to provide this story of how exactly this last year was 10%, right? How exactly is this 10% of student reduction going to impact us? Well, it's to the tune of about $5 million. Wow. So you combine that story with the data that hopefully, again, leans heavily on the relationship.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like that. Well, and especially with you've got this transit community, the repetition of being involved with these folks and the kind of continuing to tell that story that helps, I think, ideally to build and, hopefully contextualize it for the folks that are in that community. With you mentioned roughly 20% of your staff turning over. And when you've got kind of these budget declines, how do you internally in your districts, with your principals, with your other leaders across the district, how do you, continue to build out a healthy culture that continues to grow and inspire when you've got these folks that are, because of the community criteria that are, transient, they're coming in and out of those communities?
Yep, it's a good question, and it's honestly probably the biggest challenge I would say as a result of the budget is how do we not absolutely decimate our culture, right?
Wow.
So I would say last year, hopefully as an example to illustrate this, we said early on, and I'm talking when I say early, I mean like within the first announcement of, hey, by the way, we're going to have to cut $5 million. We said, here's a promise, and that promise is twofold. One, no one will lose a job. Unless it's performance related, something you did, right? We were not going to go through the pink slip process. And number two is everyone will still get a raise. And we held true to both of those. Now, what happened, obviously, as you can imagine, is a lot of other tough decisions had to be made as a result of that. But we stuck true to the idea that it was going to be people first in our decision making. And I think being able to say that at the onset and then obviously stick to it really showed people that, hey, we are committed to you. Yeah, you know what? The raise probably wasn't as much as you wanted, but we still put new money into everybody's pocket. We ate as the insurance in a health insurance rose. We ate the entire increase as the district. We didn't pass any of that along to folks, right? When I say it, I mean that nobody lost a job unless it was performance related, and I think that's critical. The second piece is realizing that not everything related to culture is indeed tied to money, as you can imagine, right? And so helping our managers, those that oversee or supervise people, understand the true impact that they have in their daily actions. That, hey, sometimes your actions, the way you treat individuals goes far greater than any amount that the district can put into new compensation packages, right? And then third is just like absolute commitment to, I would say, just radical transparency. So unless I am legally unable to share it, I am committed to providing it to you. You're going to know just as much as we do as far as this budget and where we're at and the tough decisions we're making. There's not going to be this cloud of smoke that which we hide behind. The closed door conversations in which only 1% is revealed to the public. We did not approach it that way. And I really hope people felt like, hey, as soon as a decision was made, we had full transparency on that.
Yeah. Well, and especially you mentioned earlier that another unique fact of your district is that you've got these folks that have been there for multiple generations. So building on that, through these difficult challenges and opportunities, taking that approach of transparency to build trust and show what you're doing and continue to contextualize the story of and really sort of get it to where the community can understand it. That absolutely helps, in the work that you're doing with the unique community there. So talk to me a little bit. I know that you mentioned earlier that you started in business and finance and those different things. Talk to me a little bit about, I believe you got a little bit of a background in entrepreneurship, and talk to me a little bit about the intersection between education and entrepreneurship and how this kind of leads into, you're managing these budgets that most people, like you said, don't manage these size of budgets, but, having some of that business mindset to actually help lead this district. Talk to me a little bit about your perspective there.
Sure. So current business owner of an LLC, I think, believe it or not, I think we're on year 11. Wow, that's crazy just to say that out loud. And as you know, a number of small businesses across the United States fail within their first, I think, 3 or 4 years. So I'm happy that we effectively made it past that really important choice point. And I can't take full credit for it, of course, but I'd like to think that there is certainly some lessons learned along the way that have helped with my acumen. Was just sitting next to a superintendent, a colleague yesterday, as we serve on an executive board for our state high school activity association. And he said, honestly, Kellen, you're a little bit unique, because he said most superintendents, and of course there's no data to support it, but hopefully it'll make sense. Most superintendents come with a traditional teaching and learning background. So they were a teacher, then they became an assistant principal, then a principal. You get the idea, right? Which I did still work through that kind of traditional administrative path. but very much have came maybe with more of a business background, business and operations background, than with that traditional teaching and learning background. So please hear me say, I believe in the science of reading. I believe that kids need to read. But as far as where my passion is and where I believe I add the most value, it is not in those. I hire really good people in my teaching and learning department to take care of that for me. My passion is much more on maybe stakeholder engagement, the overall larger political arena that we are very much a part of, and then certainly internally on the business and operations side. So to your point, I think that there is absolute value in entrepreneurial skills and or an entrepreneurial mindset as a CEO or as the district's chief administrator. And not trying to throw shade on people that don't have that, but I would say it provides an advantage for people that do. Because ultimately, even though we are still an educational institution, I would say we are more like a business than we are not. And so having that type of mindset, that type of approach, right? When I mention in meetings, hey, what is our opportunity cost here? And then I get stares, it tells me, hey, that's not something that's like a regular part of our vernacular. But then when I ask people to think of, okay, what are we giving up as a result of that? Now they're in that mindset and they go, oh, yes, now I could see why we should analyze what is our opportunity cost, right? It's things like ROI that, again, I'm not trying to say fellow educators don't think about, but it is a mindset, I guess, that I kind of constantly try to bring to our decision making and to the district leadership, because I do think you should evaluate what is going to be our return on investment. Maybe it's not in real dollars, but maybe it's in perception. Yeah. Maybe the court of public opinion will swing our way as a result of fill in the blank, whatever we're going to invest here, right? We're talking largely right now that we are in I would say, a recruitment crisis. Yeah. Recruitment of staff and recruitment of students because they have the ability to go somewhere else, right? Well, if you go spend $10,000 amidst this budget crisis, that's $10,000 we could have saved, right? Well, what if that $10,000 yields 20 new students? We just had a heck of an ROI on that investment, right?
Yeah.
So that type of mindset, I would say, has probably given me maybe a different view than the more traditional superintendent that may have more of a teaching and learning background. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it is a unique perspective because you're right. So many district leaders do come from sort of traditional academic, teaching and having that sort of background. But I completely agree with you. Having this sort of entrepreneurial mindset, especially when you get to chief academic officer, CEO, whatever, superintendent, whatever the district's calling it, is, having that background to be able to balance the politics that exists out there, but then lead the organization through challenges like you mentioned earlier, budget, deficits, transient population, those different things. As an entrepreneur, you approach, I think, those different challenges in a little bit more of a unique way. For aspiring superintendents who maybe don't have this sort of background, they are coming up through traditional pathways and those different things. What would you say or advice would you give them as they're trying to kind of increase their skill sets to better prepare them? And if they're looking to add some of this entrepreneurial piece back on, what advice would you give them about, sourcing and finding this sort of additional piece they can add?
Sure. First is understanding if you've got somebody in that department. So you smaller districts, they're not going to have, I would say, a traditional CFO business manager, just because the number of people at that executive cabinet level are going to be far less, right? Versus, let's say at a district my size, we have an actual business department that right now consists of 3 people, one of which is the CFO, right? That's going to look different depending upon that situation, that context. The former is going to force you almost by the day to get an operational experience because there's nobody else to lead it, right? So you're going to be forced, if you will, to lead through the budget conversation, to lead through the operational issues. The latter may allow you to say, oh no, I've got a great person over there, John or Jane Doe. They've been here for 25 years and they're a phenomenal CFO. And I hope that that's the case, but that also then, I would say, represents a potential liability because they can quickly say, hey, I don't need to worry about that. I don't need to immerse myself in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So one of my key pieces for people is to lean into the things that you are not good at right now, or that you don't have a great level of experience. And I'm actually doing this myself. I recognize that, hey, teaching and learning is not my bailiwick, but I definitely want to be able to know more about it, not only so I can support it, not only so I can talk the talk, but also so at the end of the day, I can improve my overall capacity. So I have started serving on 2 statewide committees, one of which is for accreditation, one of which is a similar type of, I would say, teaching and learning, again, statewide committee. I've also then, I would say, immersed myself in our school improvement process.
Yeah.
Would have been easy to be very hands off and said, hey, I got a great team, because I do. I have great folks in my teaching and learning team. And I know that if I were to step away and never go to another one of those meetings again, our school improvement process would continue to be facilitated well. But I've kind of decided to double down in that area.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I've backed off necessarily from the operational ends, but I'm definitely being more intentional about leaning into the areas that I recognize I'm not strong in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that would be my biggest takeaway: is recognize the areas that you aren't, and then lean into them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think what you said too is that intentionality, right? Like sort of self-evaluating, leaning in with intentionality and finding those opportunities, whether it is different community, or strategic ways that you can serve to learn more, if it's just finding the right mentor, whatever the case is, to really explore those opportunities. So when you think about, your unique community and really building authentic community partnerships, well, let me ask you this. How do you define authentic community partnerships, and why is that so essential for district leaders today?
I think I'll start with the second question first. Why I think it's so important. And it goes back to the old adage that I know is cliche, but I still believe is true to this day. It takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
As I remind our folks, hey, we get them for 8 hours-ish a day, right?
Yep.
That means the other 16 are in somebody else's care and hands, right? Now, hopefully a portion of that they're sleeping, but we only get them for 1/3 of the day, team. So that means the other 2/3 of their day are determined by other third parties, right?
Yeah.
I need those other third parties to be a part of that village. So when I arrived in Leavenworth, one of the things that I leaned into, and I said it at the interview, committed to it, was having a strong community relationship with our faith-based team.
Yep.
And so was fortunate enough that the church that I attend, that pastor has really served as, I would say, a leader of the faith-based other organizations, have now a regular, I would say, cadence and communication with that group. The second group that I lead heavily into is our business community. So actively, I would say almost not a day goes by in which I don't have some type of contact with our chamber's executive director. And she's been phenomenal in helping me bridge those gaps with the business community. Some of whom, may ultimately have either current students, former students for sure, may have spouses of employees working for them. You get the idea. There is a connection there, right? But at the end of the day, I recognize that I think we're the second or third highest employer. So we are very much the bigger fish in a smaller pond, right? And we're one of your main taxing entities. So I touch every home in some way, right? Yeah. I recognize that completely. And so having that authentic relationship is critical for us as what I call us a VIP. We're a very important partner in the community, right? What I cannot have is strain in that relationship. Yeah. Whether that relationship is one way or hopefully it's two way. The authenticity piece to me is at the end of the day, we are ultimately appreciated for the purpose that we serve, and we ultimately seek to provide that service. The increased improvement of educational outcomes for kids, right? But in return, hopefully, we're adding value back to the community as well. So, I don't know if that fully answered your question, but that authentic piece is when it's transactional. I would say when the relationship is purely transactional, that's not authentic. It's when it gets that higher level, is it authentic for me?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that goes back to an earlier piece in the conversation is when you were selecting Leavenworth and narrowing down the options with your wife and finding the right community. That's a piece of it that's so important is, when you're a member of that community and you're leading a very large, the second largest employer in the community, to be able to approach those community partnerships with truly transparent, authentic trust is a huge piece of it. And, for leaders who maybe don't, or aspiring superintendents who don't kind of build that or select those right communities, it will, inauthenticity, is you can see it a mile away. And so it does play into the success of the district and how those, that evolves and those different things continue to go from there. So speaking of community engagement initiatives and the partnerships, I think it's always interesting to hear, like, how do folks measure, your success of your community, engagements and your partnerships? You've mentioned multiple things, and there's a certain piece of this when you're approaching this with just authentic trust and building this, that there's sort of intrinsic just knowledge through the relationship. But as a district and somebody with your background with entrepreneurship and having this sort of business acumen, how do you measure the success of this? What does that look like, or do you do this?
This one is harder for me to quantify. I'll be honest with you, right?
Well,
one of the things I started paying attention to, though, whether the metric was appropriate or not, was the number of people that were coming to our board meeting to speak at open forum.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really large when I got here, and it has drastically declined, right?
Yeah.
And I realize it's arbitrary in nature, and I recognize that. But that was an important part for me because it said, hey, clearly they don't feel like there's any other outlet.
Right.
So they've had to decide, I'm going to give up a portion of my Monday night to come and speak on a microphone on live TV because that's the only way I can be heard. And that was really disheartening to me, right? And so I had made it a goal that, hey, we're going to have better lines of communication, better processes for communication, because very rarely does an issue really, at the end of the day, ultimately deserve to go all the way to the microphone at the dais, right?
Wow.
I'm thinking like large, major issues, type of real activists. Hey, I'm wanting to light a fire on this thing. That's when you go to the podium, right? Yeah. You don't go to the podium to express disdain over the way the third grade teacher has treated your son, right? That should have been resolved at what I call the lowest level possible. And so one of the things we worked hard on is establishing a lines of communication process and protocol, and then ensuring we've got kind of regular steps along the way that ensure that happens.
Good.
Things that are small, but ultimately I think important, right? So when you get an email, you respond within 24 hours and making that kind of a non-negotiable. You may not have the answer within 24 hours, but people will at least have been acknowledged. And the same goes for phone calls, et cetera, right? These, again, are small things. If something lands in your inbox that really isn't for you, because it should be either one, resolved at a much lower level, or two, it's much out of your wheelhouse, that you forward it on to the appropriate person. You don't just dismiss them and say, hey, sorry, not my job description, right? But rather you direct accordingly. And then third is creating this kind of constant feedback loop so that, hey, even if and when we aren't necessarily ignoring people, we're getting back to them, et cetera, there's still going to be issues that are unresolved, either because they're systemic in nature or they're far beyond the bounds of that person. What's a regular feedback loop so that I can understand what are more of our, I'm going to say, consistent and pervasive issues, right? So one of the things I instituted was a listening tour. I've done it twice now. I go around to every single building and meet with their staff directly. And it's an opportunity for me to hear kind of what are those broader issues that are being experienced. Because again, I don't expect a principal to leave everybody happy at the end of the day. I do expect my principals to answer to every email, like whether or not they answer what the answer they want. That, of course, is probably never going to happen. Right. So what are our broader issues? Because those should, one, inform me, but also I would say inform our board and inform our administrative team as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That That's a huge piece, like the acknowledgement piece of just, well, and especially with, I keep going back to your unique community, and part of it is I'm familiar with Leavenworth. And so knowing how that transitions and having that acknowledgement when you've got multi-generational folks and you've got transient populations, and just having that acknowledgement, it continues to build on, this sort of relationship of trust between the district and the community. And you've got to have that in those, those exceptionally unique districts that are leading those. To kind of switch gears and kind of get to wrapping us up, when you think about Leavenworth and you think about the future, what does that look like? What does success look like? What does it look like? And not necessarily success, because as a district, we're always growing, but what does it look like 3 and 5 years from now? That, if and whether it's specific things you want to accomplish or just, the community development, what does that kind of look like for Leavenworth in the future?
Sure. I'll speak broader to maybe the county or the city.
Yeah.
I would say right now we're on the precipice of some important decisions on where we go from an economic development standpoint, and really some, I would say, choice points that are right in front of us on whether or not we want to give the signal that, hey, we are indeed open to economic development, or hey, we're just not interested at this time, right? So a couple housing developments that are very much on the verge of either landing here or not, which I think will be highly informative as it relates to maybe some commercial and light industrial development. That then, I think, ultimately, when you combine that with the direction the military is going, will have an impact on this community, good or bad. Those decisions will have an impact on this community, which will then invariably have an impact on this school district, right? Realizing, of course, the school district has very little to do with those, right? I try to get us to, hey, focus on what we can control. And so one of two things, we'll either need to be prepared for a renaissance or prepared to manage decline in a way that people don't feel it. Because at the end of the day, one of two things happens. I don't see us just flatlining just because of our kind of unique situation with the district and specifically with health. But there is a way that you can decline in a manner that doesn't feel like you're closing your doors in just a few years. That maintains the integrity of the things you're proud of. That ensures that you're going to prioritize the right spending and the right priorities for purposes of putting dollars in the classroom, right? Conversely, if we were to go through a renaissance and we have that growth, it's ensuring that we stay true to our values, but while at the same time, making sure that we've created space and time for those new opportunities and the new kids that hopefully are coming, right? At the end of the day, you're either in one of two boats, but regardless, you've got to hold true to what you are, while at the same time managing either that decline or that growth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's part of the uniqueness of Leavenworth for sure. And the things that are kind of literally coming down the pike to see how it's going to impact the community. Well, Kellen, thank you so much for just sitting down, chatting with me, telling people more about the district that you're leading and sharing your background, and then sharing some things with other folks and hopefully aspiring leaders that they can take to kind of begin to build out and take maybe a similar path. Closing out, is there any closing words you'd like to share, or how can people kind of stay in tune and connected with you, or find you outside of Leavenworth?
Sure. So I would say a couple of different things. First, to the connection piece, do serve as a half-time professor for Kansas State University. So very much have a passion for teaching at the university level. Also working in that space as far as publishing and presenting. And so have a passion for the school finance, but also just the broader school culture, stakeholder engagement, community engagement piece, right? So if there's ever, for anybody listening, a desire to co-partner on that, would love to be able to be a thought partner with regard to other district leaders that may be going through that. And then I'll leave you with the same thing that I leave my new teachers with every year. And I've affectionately called it the love triangle, which, makes people usually chuckle when they hear that phrase, right? But it's my challenge to our new folks as they enter our system, and that's to love three things. First, love the kids that you serve. Because invariably some of them aren't getting any love at home. Second, it is to love the colleagues that you serve with. Because at the end of the day, these are the people you're honestly going to spend more time with than your own family. And I need you to really lean into your coworkers. And finally, to love the purpose for which you're here. I'm a firm believer in public ed. I have always been and I always will be. And so if and when you're ever questioning whether or not you have a purpose here in public education, I can assure you, you do. Yeah. And so again, my parting shot, if you will, is to lean into the love triangle.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Sharing your time with us in the closing words, and have a good rest of your day.
You as well. Thank you. Take care.